la idea de esta comunidad es evidentemente presentarles contenido de valor, contenido que nos sea útil, que nos ayude a combatir allá afuera la sobrecarga, la variabilidad y el desperdicio, que es un poco lo que predica Lynn. El objetivo de esta comunidad es construirles contenido de valor que les ayude a combatir la sobrecarga, la variabilidad y el desperdicio. Hemos preparado un pequeño marco de referencia para entender cómo les generamos valor, qué tipo de contenido necesitan ustedes para poder hacérselos llegar, traer a gente como Daniel Vacanti o otros ponentes de lujo que tenemos por ahí. Entonces, son 3 preguntas muy sencillas. La primera pregunta, ¿qué contenido le genera valor a tu rol prácticamente, no? ¿Cómo te podemos hacer un cambanista veraz? ¿Qué necesitas saber? La siguiente es, pues, prácticamente, ¿qué duele hoy sobre ser un cambanista veraz, no? ¿Qué impedimentos, retos tenemos por ahí? Y al final, con todo este conocimiento que vas a adquirir, ¿qué es lo que esperas? ¿Cuál es el resultado que esperas? Entonces, les voy a dar unos minutitos ahí para que nos ayuden a contestar. La herramienta es para poder interactuar con ustedes. Ahora con este mundo de pandemia es más difícil, ¿no? Poder interactuar, así es que estamos buscando herramientas y formas para poder simular conversaciones con ustedes. Entonces, la idea es que elijas cuáles son las 3 principales. Recuerden, el objetivo es poderles hacer llegar contenido de valor. Eso es lo que queremos todos, ¿no? Recibir información que sea pragmática, accionable, que pueda llevar, que me pueda llevar, que la pueda utilizar sobre todo, ¿no? Ese es el espíritu de esta comunidad. Ayudarnos entre todos para dar los resultados que se esperan allá afuera. Perfecto, 22, excelente. Gracias, comunidad. Gracias por ayudarnos a entender cómo les podemos ayudar a generar valor. Ok, necesitamos traer contenido, prácticamente de técnicas para planificar, estimar, facilitar conversaciones y métricas, ¿no? Por ahí está un poquito abajo lo de Marcos, creo que ya hemos escuchado mucho de Marcos y demás, buenísimo. Sí, los retos que tenemos hoy es que los costos son caros, demasiada teoría, coincido con ustedes, y además ahora con la pandemia parece que estamos conectados 24/7, poco tiempo para aprender, sin duda. Y bueno, ¿qué es lo que esperamos al final? Entregar valor al cliente, mejorar la colaboración, es uno de los principales retos que hemos tenido ahora con este tema de la pandemia, y mejorar la calidad. Buenísimo. Perfecto, pues con eso ya tenemos una idea muy clara de cómo les podemos ayudar a traer ese contenido. Y bueno, sin más, les presento a Daniel Vacanti. Para aquellos que no lo conozcan, mal, tacha ahí, ha escrito 2 libros, principalmente sobre Kanban, pero no solamente eso, ayudó a co-crear muchas personas, no lo saben, pero hay una guía de equipos de Kanban para equipos de Scrum, en donde también participó, fundador de una herramienta que yo amo, Action About Agile, ¿no? Me han escuchado si nos han seguido esa herramienta que siempre saco, ahí tienen al fundador, a la mente detrás de esa herramienta, y evidentemente también ahorita está muy activo con una propuesta de comunidad también de Kanban, a ver si por ahí nos puede contar un poco. But now I'm going to switch to English. Daniel, welcome to Kanban Kai, man. Hope that you have prepared your best Spanish.
Hola a todos. I'm supposed to speak in Spanish. So here's my best Spanish, if everybody's ready. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Merci d'être ici. Je m'appelle Daniel Vacanti. J'habite à Florida.
Perfecto.
Is that Spanish?
You're in the wrong room, man.
That's
terrible, man.
That's the best. I'm sorry. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry.
Welcome to the show, Daniel. We are really excited to have you here. We have been looking forward for this for so long. So thank you for being here with the Mexican community of Mexican and Latam, I will say, of Kanbanistas. And well, Daniel, cost of delay. What the heck is cost of delay? Does it work?
Yeah, we're going to spend the next hour or so finding out about that. But first, let me say, number one, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, for the invitation. I know it was supposed to be in person. I think last time we talked, I was supposed to be there in person. So hopefully, maybe later this year or next year, I get the chance to see all of you, live and in person. So, yeah, let's talk about cost of delay. And I do, just up front, I do want it to be more of a conversation. So I think, Alex talked about, different ways that we might be able to interact. But I'll pause from time to time, and maybe we'll take some questions and have more of a discussion. Certainly there'll be time at the end, I think, for that, but my preference would be let's have a little fun. Maybe you probably should have been playing music this whole time, Alex. So
let's kick it off, man. So,
okay.
si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, escríbanos ahí en Slido. Vamos a estar ahí pendientes. Y bueno, si en algún momento Daniel hace alguna pausa, vamos a revisar si hay alguna pregunta por ahí y se lanzamos. So, without further review, don't be a ditka. Cool, man. Walk us through.
I apologize. We're going to be talking about not proper football, which is American football. I wish we could be talking about real football, and maybe some other time we can do a presentation on some real football. But this is going to be mostly American football. So apologies for that. The first thing I want to say is this presentation and the material in this presentation was built by a friend and colleague of mine. His name is Pratik Singh. I don't know if many of you have heard of the name Pratik Singh. I don't know if he's even here. I told him that he should show up and heckle me. So I don't know if he's lurking out there somewhere. If none of you have heard the name Pratik Singh or have never seen him, I actually brought a picture. This is my absolute favorite picture of Pratik of all time, and here it is. Right, this is. Okay. But this is honest. Believe it or not, this is honestly Pratik. You can see his arm here. This is one of his dogs, Kea. But this is, I mean, the only picture of him that I could show probably in good conscience. So that's Pratik. But let's talk about let's talk about this talk, right? I'm going to give you the punchline right up front here. I'm going to tell you everything that we're going to talk about right up front. So maybe all of you can go home, or we can start drinking early, or whatever we need to do. But there's a lot of conversation in Agile that Agile is all about outcomes over output. It doesn't really matter how much output we put out, as long as we're getting the right outcomes. And the point of this talk is that what we found is the opposite is actually closer to the truth. I don't want to say it's always the truth, but it's closer to the truth. That really, to get the right outcomes that you want, you really should be focusing on output. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through. But really, if I had to sum up this talk in just one sentence, and one sentence alone, it would be this, and that is the only real risk is thinking you have a winning strategy when you have a losing one. Pretty much everything that I do, I talk about Agile metrics, I talk about forecasting, I talk about Kanban and process and things like that. All of those are just fancy terms for risk management. Everything I talk about is risk management. And you can boil risk down to this sentence: is if you think you have a winning strategy and you have a losing one, that's the biggest risk that you can incur. So hopefully we're gonna talk about how to avoid that scenario too. All right. Alex, how good are you at estimating value? You've done this Agile thing for a while. How good are you at estimating value?
I suck, man.
Who doesn't, right? Honestly, I don't know who does. Maybe let me ask you an easier question. When, at what point in the process are you typically estimating value?
Upfront, always.
Yeah, right. Upfront, right at the beginning, before we even work on anything. This is fairly typical, right? I mean, that's part of the way that you figure out is, should we be working on this or not, is upfront we need to do some estimation of value, and then we decide what we're going to work on based on that estimation of value. One final question. So do you think you're better or worse than the NFL at estimating value? So the National Football League, we're going to talk about American football here. They're estimating values of players all the time, right? Millions, if not tens of millions of dollars that they're betting on, that they can estimate value. So do you think you're better or worse than the NFL, who spends?
I don't know, man. I'm a Steelers fan, and for the last 20 years we haven't done much.
We can't be friends anymore. I'm sorry, we can't be.
Oh, come on, man.
At least you didn't say Dallas. At least you didn't say the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, yeah.
Then you would for sure be dead to me forever.
But I will say, to answer your question, I will say that they should know. I mean, they should know their business, right? I mean, they
Right.
have been for a while, so they're. I'm guessing that they are supposed to know how to estimate value, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. I mean, I think they, if you totaled up how much the NFL has spent on this one question over the years, I bet you it would total in the billions of dollars. I'd be willing to bet that they have invested billions of
definitely.
dollars trying to figure out, trying to estimate value up front. Well, let's talk about, one specific example. And first some background about how the NFL works. If anybody knows how the NFL works, every year they have what's called a draft, and it's in the draft where the teams get together, the teams in the NFL get together, and they're able to pick the players that they want to join their teams. Now, typically these players are coming out of the college system, coming out of university, and these players will declare for the draft, and teams in the NFL will decide which ones they want to pick and which ones they don't want to pick. Now, the way that the order in the draft is determined is by the record of the teams in the previous year. So coming up in the 2021 draft, that draft order is largely, not always, but largely determined by the records of the teams in the 2020 season. And the team with the worst overall record picks first, and the team with the second worst picks second, and et cetera, et cetera. So you go from worst to first in terms of picking. It's hopefully it's supposed to help drive parity in the league, so the best teams always don't get the best players. So I want to rewind all the way back to the 1999 draft. And the order in that for that particular year in that draft was the Cleveland Browns picked first. And I like to say I think they've picked first every year since then. Although this year they had a pretty decent year, so they don't have the first pick this year. But the Cleveland Browns picked first. The Philadelphia Eagles were second. The Bengals were third. Colts fourth. But all the way down to number 12 is the team that I'm really interested in, is the New Orleans Saints. Now, New Orleans had just hired a head coach by the name of Mike Ditka, and if you're an American football fan at all, you have heard the name Mike Ditka. He became probably most famous with his Super Bowl win with the Chicago Bears, back in 1985. But he's one of these larger than life personalities that when the Saints hired him, he was supposed to be their savior. He was supposed to be the one that was going to turn around the team. And going into that draft, Mike Ditka decided that the only thing that was keeping the Saints from winning the Super Bowl is having a really good running attack, a really good running back. And so what he decided is that he was going to do whatever he could to get the best running back in the draft that year that he thought was the best running back in the draft that year. And that was a guy by the name of Ricky Williams.
Wow.
Now this is an actual cover from ESPN magazine way back then. I don't know if they could get away with that this year. It's kind of a sign of the times or whatever. But what Mike Ditka did is he essentially bet he bet his whole draft on Ricky Williams. So I mentioned how the order in which teams pick, but there are several rounds of that. There's like 6 or 7 rounds where the teams will go through and they get to pick players. What Mike Ditka did, because remember, he was in 12th place and he figured there's no way that Ricky Williams is still going to be available by the time we get to the 12th place. So what Mike Ditka did is he went in and he traded away all his draft picks in that year. In fact, I think I have some slides on this. So what he wanted to do, he needed to trade up from the 12th pick to the 5th pick to be able to get Ricky Williams. In order to do that, he gave up all of the Saints' other picks, not just the first round, but all rounds in the 1990 draft. And additionally, the 1st and 3rd pick in the next year's draft, the 2000 draft. So I think in total, he gave away 8 or 9 picks or something just to get this one player, just to trade up from the 12th to the 5th pick. Now, Alex, by doing all this, what was the statement that Ditka was making? What's he really saying?
It's all that we need to win, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if I got this guy, I'm ready to go. Super Bowl.
Exactly. that he knew with 100% certainty that I pick up Ricky Williams, and when I get Ricky Williams, I'm going to win a Super Bowl. That's what he was saying by giving away this year's draft and giving away next year's draft. That's exactly what he was saying. Now you have to wait till the end of the talk to to find out what really happened, although I'm sure most of you can guess what happened to the New Orleans Saints in 1999. There's actually a more relevant, somebody please remind me, there's a more relevant, more recent example potentially in Tom Brady. So I want to tell the Tom Brady story at the end of the talk too, because that's like I said, that's maybe a more immediately relevant. But let's talk about the lean agile space, okay? So we have to do some context setting, and I'm hoping some assumptions that I'm going to throw out here are not too over the top, but I'm going to assume that you're in a context where you want to optimize and maybe maximize. Usually optimize and maximize mean the same thing, but they don't have to. But we're going to say we want to optimize value. That's generally speaking a pretty safe assumption, but I just want to make sure that you know going into this talk, I'm assuming you want to optimize value. That's what you want to do. So the fundamental problem when going into this value optimization context, whatever we want to say, the fundamental problem that we have to solve here is we have a limited supply of resources, and this is people, time, money, whatever, with which to satisfy an overwhelming demand of that are on those limited resources. Right? I mean, there's no way that a team that you work on could ever possibly satisfy all the requests that is coming in from your customer, certainly in a reasonable amount of time, but probably ever. So because we've got all of this demand that's coming in, and we've got all these very, very limited resources, what do we do? What's the typical thing that we do? In one word, Alex, can you say, how do we handle this problem? What in Lean Agile, how do we handle this problem? We got all this work to do, but we've only got a few people to do it. What do we do?
I don't know in the Lean Agile, man, but in the real world, I mean, we'll have someone asking us to do something, regardless of the limitations, right?
Yeah, they don't probably necessarily, they don't want to hear any excuses about we have too little people or too little money or too little time. But a typical response to this is to prioritize, right? I mean, that's generally speaking. I mean, when you look at most agile frameworks, they have some notion of either a way to prioritize or a person who is responsible for handling that prioritization. Because we know we can't get everything done, so let's at least prioritize the work that needs to get done. So hopefully we're getting the highest value stuff done. That's the idea. Some traditional prioritization schemes, some of you may be familiar with these, stack ranking based on value, which is, dubious. Highest paid person's opinion, which is even more dubious. The Eurovision Song Contest. I don't know. Do you get the Eurovision Song Contest in Mexico? I don't know. Do you? Do you know what I mean by that? It's kind of like American Idol, but not where just everybody votes for what they like the best.
We have those voting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same thing. Then there's something cost of delay divided by duration, or CD3, and then of course my favorite's throwing darts, crying, whatever. So we have evolved all of these schemes to handle prioritization, the problem of prioritization. This particular talk is going to be focusing on, of course, this cost of delay thing, and this cost of delay divided by duration. And if you don't worry if you don't know what any of those terms mean, because that's what the rest of this talk is going to be about, is talking about that. Have I set this up nicely before? Because I want to jump right into a definition. What do I really mean by cost of delay? But I just want to make sure, have I set this up nicely so that everybody kind of knows where we're at and what we're doing?
Yeah, so far so good, man.
Okay, good. Just interrupt me if there's any really cool question or whatever that comes in. Just interrupt me, and I'll just yell quiet at you. Right? Okay.
Quiet.
Right.
Go ahead, man.
All right. So cost of delay. If we are going to talk about cost of delay, we first have to have some agreement on what cost of delay is. Because if anybody's done any research on cost of delay, you'll see that there's a lot of can I say crap? There's a lot of crap out there. A lot of just not very good stuff on cost of delay. So what I want to do is I want to channel my inner Don Reinertson. He's the person that I follow the most, that I consider the authority on this topic. So when I define cost of delay, I define it in terms of Don Reinertson. If you haven't heard the name Don Reinertson before, I highly recommend you look up his work. Specifically a book called The Principles of Product Development Flow. My guess is if you're in the Kanban Kai, you better have heard of Don Reinertsen and the principles of flow, his flow book. So I'm going to do my best to define this the way that he does. And this is literally the definition that Don Reinertsen gives. So if you see any other definition of cost of delay, I don't want to say that stuff is bad, but it ain't cost of delay, right? It might be something else. It's just not cost of delay. Okay. All right. The first thing that we need to do to calculate cost of delay is we need to build what's called a lifetime profits curve. And for our lifetime profits curve, across the bottom is time, and up the side, up that y-axis, is lifetime profit. And the way that you build this curve is you say, okay, let's say that I release a product, a feature or a product or a project or whatever. I'm releasing something, and I release it on January 1st. If I were to release it on January 1st, what is my expectation of what the lifetime profit of that product will be if it's released on January 1st? So you kind of project out into the future and you add up all the profit that you can think that this thing was going to make over its lifetime. And let's say it comes up to be 1 million. And so we plot it on the chart like this, okay? Right? That's literally what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to kind of calculate what you think that lifetime profit is going to be. If we're not able to deliver this thing on January 1st, and let's say it's delayed until February 1st, then we do a similar calculation. Well, if we don't get it on January 1st, but we get it on February 1st, what is our expected lifetime profit then? And the expectation is that if there is a delay from, say, January 1st to February 1st, then the lifetime profits will actually be lower. I mean, it stands to reason. It's lower just for the very reason that you've got less time that it's out there making money. And so on February 1st, you say, okay, well, if it's released on February 1st, we're not going to make $1 million in lifetime profits. We'll probably make $900,000 in lifetime profits. So you literally do that for every date out into the future that you're interested in. You just build what's called a lifetime profits curve. Now, this right here, I want to be clear, this right here is not a cost of delay curve. A lot of people will tell you that this is a cost of delay curve. This is not a cost of delay curve. This is a lifetime profits curve, okay? But once we have this, then we can calculate cost of delay. And the way that we calculate cost of delay is, everybody's probably heard the expression time is money, right? So we say, time equals money. So therefore, a change in time equals a change in money. So I'm gonna get very mathy here, by the way. I probably should have said that up front. This is going to be very math intensive. If you've read any Don Reinertsen, it's math intensive. So change in time equals a change in money. But the problem here, if anybody's familiar with physics or engineering or whatever, and any reasonable person would look at this and say, well, we've got an equation, but the units don't balance. You see, on the left side we have units in terms of time, and on the right side we have units in terms of money. That's called dimensional analysis. You don't really need to know that, but that's what that's called. So we need yet another term in this equation to balance these units. And that term that we're missing in the equation is the partial derivative of our lifetime profits curve. This is no joke. This is literally, right? Literally how you calculate cost of delay. If you think you're doing cost of delay now and you're not doing any of this, you're not doing cost of delay. Like I said, you might be doing something else. You're not doing cost of delay. Because if we have this, it's that partial derivative term that is cost of delay. And it's always in terms of money per time, right? I've got dollars here, but it could be anything. It could be euros, it could be pounds, it could be, pesos, it could be whatever. That is what cost of delay is. That's the definition of cost of delay. So going back to our lifetime profits curve, that partial derivative represents the slope of the tangent at any point along this curve. And so we should be able to figure out, if we have this lifetime profits curve, that's what our cost of delay is. You're doing all this, right, Alex? You're using cost of delay, and you're doing all of this. Is that right?
Yeah. No, I mean I've read another way, right? Fibonacci divided into Fibonacci. I have read it somewhere.
Yeah. And again, and that's what I'm saying. Again, that's not cost of delay. It's something else. And that something else might be good. It probably isn't, but it ain't cost of delay, right? So this is literally how you are supposed to calculate cost of delay. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is that you really don't need to worry about any of that math. There's an easier way to kind of define cost of delay, but if you want to be mathematically specific, you should do it the other way. But Here are just some sentences again directly from Don Reinertsen about what cost of delay is. So the amount of decrease in cumulative lifetime profit due to the delay in the introduction of an item, or stated a different way, the lifetime profit of an item is dependent on its availability date, and cost of delay is a measure of the rate of that dependency. And like I said, it seems reasonable that if we have a delay in delivering an item, that our expected lifetime profit in delivering that item should go down. If we have this economic framework that is cost of delay, and that's really what cost of delay gives us, is this economic framework to discuss these trade-offs, then all other things being equal, value is maximized over the long run by minimizing cost of delay. This is the whole point of this is what proponents of cost of delay will tell you is, if we can understand cost of delay, then if we minimize cost of delay, we will maximize value. And remember, I said up front, that's what you care about. Again, if you don't care about value, you should probably just leave this talk now, right? But that's the highlighted piece. There's another highlighted piece that we need to talk about though, and that's this all other things being equal, because that's where the gotcha is. And the rest of this talk will kind of talk about what that gotcha is. So let's use an example, because I've been throwing a lot of stuff at you. So let's talk about a specific example. And I hope everybody's following this. Again, just interrupt me if you need me to slow down or go into a little bit more detail. Given the definitions that I've just put in front of you, let's say that a project A has a cost delay of 5,000 per week. Project B has a cost delay of 10,000 per week. Both projects will take exactly the same amount of time to complete. I've got an asterisk there because we'll talk about when they don't take the same amount of time a little bit later, which they almost certainly won't take the same amount of time. But let's just say these two projects will take the same amount of time to complete. We only have capacity to start one of these now. Which one should we choose? So Alex, to put you on the spot, based on the definition of cost of delay, which one should we use?
Should it be B?
B, yeah, because B has the higher cost of delay. That means we should choose project B, because over time, by finishing the ones with the highest cost of delay first, that's what's going to minimize cost of delay and make everything better, right? Perfect, easy. Why is this an hour talk, right? I just explained cost of delay in less than an hour, about 30 minutes. Okay, well, let's complicate things a little bit. We'll complicate them a little bit first, and then we'll complicate them even more just a little bit later. Let's say that feature A has a cost of delay of 5,000 per week and has a completion time of 10 weeks. Let's say feature B has a cost of delay of 5,000 per week and has a completion time of 5 weeks. And feature C has a cost of delay of 10,000 per week and has a completion time of 5 weeks. So now we've got projects or features with different costs of delays, and they've also got different times to completion. This becomes a little bit a little bit more complicated, but thankfully we have tools to be able to handle this. And this is where we're going to calculate something that's called, and this is where it gets really, really confusing. We're going to calculate something called delay cost. This is different than cost of delay. But it's literally called delay cost. And the way that you figure out delay cost is, again, we have a graph where we have time across the bottom and a cost of delay up the side. And we can say, like in this example, remember feature A was going to take 10 weeks. It had a cost of delay of 5,000 per week. So that means that area under this curve, if you will, where we just kind of multiply 5,000 times 10,000, that total delay cost is 50,000. And we can do that for every feature. Remember, feature B was 5 weeks and 5,000. So it had a total delay cost of 25,000. And we can do the same thing for C, but I'm sure you get the picture, and I got tired of building out PowerPoint slides. So you kind of know what I'm going after here. So if you can only work on one feature at a time, how do we figure out that right sequence so we're minimizing cost of delay and actually minimizing the total delay cost? Well, what you can do is we can start playing around with rectangles, and we can say, well, if we, let's say if we start If we start A first, well, that means while we're working on A, we're incurring the cost of delay of A. But remember, we're also incurring the cost of delay of B. and we're incurring the cost of delay of C. Okay? So for that whole time, we're incurring cost of delay for all three of these things. Then when A finishes, we can start B. And while we're working on B, remember, we're still incurring the cost of delay of C. And only when B finishes, we start C and we still incur that cost. So you can kind of see how by stacking these rectangles, we can figure out our total delay cost for that amount of time, figure out that area under the curve. And then the idea is to come up with the right sequencing that gives us the smallest area under that curve. Now I'm going to short circuit this, and I'm just going to let you know that the right sequence in this particular example is CBA, because that's a total delay cost. It's probably helpful to see these side by side. So on the left, that was the first example I gave you, ABC. On the right, the last example I gave you was CBA, and hopefully it's pretty obvious. On the right, there's a lot less area under that curve, so that's the right solution. Okay, easy. Remember, I just want to point out to everybody that we asked you what you wanted me to talk about, and you said cost of delay. So
yeah, that is up to these guys, not me.
You kind of brought it on yourselves. All right. Nobody wants to sit around and play around with triangles, with rectangles or anything like that. So there's a shortcut. There's actually a shortcut to all, as always, there's always a shortcut. And the shortcut is to use something called CD3. CD3 stands for cost of delay divided by duration. So if what you do for each of those features, you just take the cost of delay, remember I said it was 5,000 per week, divide it by the number of weeks, its duration, to come up with a number that is cost per week squared, which don't even get me started on even what these units mean, because it's pretty much nonsense. So, but anyway, if we were to do this, if we figure out cost of delay divided by duration, or CD3 for feature A, it'd be 500 per week squared. For feature B, it'd be 1,000 per week squared. For feature C, it'd be 2,000 per week squared. And looking at this, hopefully it's pretty obvious. You can see, again, we want to minimize our CD3. So that means we would start with the largest number, which is feature C. Then we go on to the next largest number, which is B. And then the next one after that, which is A. So you see how CD3 gives us the exact same answer as what we just saw for the rectangle, right? Okay. Are there questions so far? Because I want to say, yeah, this is easy. It's obviously anything but easy. But so what's the problem? I mean, because this is, I want to be clear. Everything that I showed you is mathematically correct. That is exactly how you do this. There's nothing wrong with the mathematics of this. So what's the problem? I don't know. Alex, I don't know if you want to comment, or if there are any questions or any comments from anybody in the audience.
Just reading Slido, no comments, okay. Questions there. I don't know if they are trying to figure out the math where you would say.
I know. It's crazy. But literally, if you're not doing that, you're not doing cost of delay.
So right. We have one, says Janely, the pain point is how to get the 5K for each feature, because I assume the business has to give me the value, right?
Exactly. That you are. So that's exactly the problem. How do we know what that 5,000 is? How do we know what that 10,000 is? How do we know what that, whatever is? It's actually even worse than that, but I'll get into that because there are at least three problems of what we just talked about. There's really more than that, but there's three problems that I want to highlight. And those three problems are, we are assuming the following. Number one, that value is deterministic. And I think this kind of gets to the point that the person just made. What we're saying is, whatever that cost of delay that we calculated before we started working on the item, remember Alex correctly said, hey, we're estimating this value before we even start on it. And we're assuming that whatever value that we estimated is exactly the value that we're going to get when we ultimately deliver that. Think about that for a second. How often does that really happen? Okay, so that's number one. We're also assuming that duration is deterministic. Remember in our CD3 calculation, I said feature A is going to take exactly 5 weeks or whatever it was, and feature C is going to take or feature B is going to take exactly 10 weeks, right? That we know.
Wait, Daniel. So what if I'm doing story points and that is the duration that I have? Can I use this?
Well, so yeah, you're just saying things to make me upset now. I know this. It's a good thing. So you think this is water, but it's not. It's something else. I'm onto you.
Because
Yeah.
you're
So
talking about
remember,
the
yeah,
duration, right?
yeah. So
So
remember I said, but this is a great question. Remember I said before, the cost of delay is always in terms of money per time. It's always money per time. So the second you throw story points in there, we're no longer talking about cost of delay. It's something else. It's something completely different. And like I said, I don't know what that other thing is. I literally do not know what that is. I don't even know what you would call it. Um, I kind of know what you would call it, but actually I do have a name for it, but I can't say it. I can't say it right now. But it is not cost of delay. So anybody who says we're going to do, story points per sprint or whatever it is to come up with duration, that is not cost of delay. And then now making calculations and forecasts based on that. Again, you're doing something, but you're not doing cost of delay at that point. So
cool, thanks.
yeah, no, it's an important point. So we are saying, based on all the calculations I've done so far, we're saying value is deterministic. We know with 100% certainty. We're saying duration is deterministic. We know 100% certainty. This is going to take exactly 10 weeks. And another thing which most people don't consider is we're saying that no new options show up. So in that example where I said, we're doing feature C, then feature B, then feature A. Well, what happens if at some point a feature D showed up? While we're working on feature C, feature D shows up, and now we have to do all our calculations again. And what if it turns out that feature D has a higher cost of delay than feature C? Well, cost of delay would say we'd stop C and work on D. Okay, so we start working on D, and now feature E shows up, and feature E has even higher cost of delay than feature D. So we stop working on D and we work on E, right? Were you going to say something, Alex?
We're in a loop, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Everything that I've talked about right now, these are the things we're assuming. As you know, none of these really match. At least it's been my experience anyway, that none of these really match, the real world. And here's the deal. All of these assumptions are wrong. In my opinion, all of those assumptions are wrong. Believe it or not, they're not all fatal. We have workarounds for them, but they do require some discussion. And these workarounds that we we're going to talk about, are going to force us to kind of rethink the validity of a cost of delay CD3 approach. Okay, so let's see if we can model these assumptions. What results might we get? This is where our good friend Monte Carlo comes in. Honestly, we probably should have done a Monte Carlo talk before we did this, because the rest of this presentation is going to rely heavily on Monte Carlo simulation. So my apologies if you're not familiar with Monte Carlo simulation. Maybe go look it up after this. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be simulating different scenarios so that we can compare the results and to see if CD3 is really the right answer. Okay, all right. And by the way, if anybody's confused by this is really the part that Pratik did. So just go yell at him, because I'm just going to throw him under the bus. All right, to set up our simulation, we're going to say that our projects last anywhere between 0 and 20 weeks. Every project can bring in, anywhere between $0 and $10,000. New projects show up every 2 weeks. We're going to run this portfolio for 40 weeks to see how much money we made. And we're going to use 3 prioritization schemes: CD3, duration, and random. So let me just explain this for a second. What we're assuming here is that, number one, duration is not deterministic. We're saying that we are going to randomly choose. We don't know how long projects are going to, any individual project is going to take. So we're just going to randomly assume and pick a number for each project between 0 and 20, which I think is more like the real world. It's rarely do we know up front how long projects are going to take, but we might know within some reasonable range and probability. So that's what we're going to do. Same thing with value. We don't know exactly how much value each individual project is going to make. So again, we're just going to randomly choose numbers between 0 and 10,000. Now, by the way, every project can bring in 0 to 100. We're actually cheating here to make the results a little bit more fair. because nobody would believe the results if you do it in what really happens in the real world. Because has every project, let me ask you, Alex, every project you've ever worked on, has it ever at least broken even or made money? Is that
Was it even delivered?
exactly, exactly. How many times have we invested a whole bunch of money and then never delivered anything? That's a negative return on investment. That's negative value. Or even worse, we delivered it and it cost us money. Right? That happens all the time too. So even more realistically, this shouldn't be bounded by zero. It should be negative. But like I said, when you start introducing negative numbers into this, then nobody really believes it. So to be a little bit more, I keep saying it's a little bit more fair, but it's a little bit more hopefully believable. We're actually saying zero. Anyway, but the other thing is that makes it a little bit more realistic, like I said, is now new projects are showing up all the time. And we're going to do like I talked about. When new projects show up, we're going to rerun the calculations to see, okay, what is the order that we should be working on? And so we're going to choose three sequencing schemes. CD3, let me see. Prioritizing based on CD3, prioritizing on just based on duration alone, shortest to longest. And then we're just going to just pick stuff at random. It's kind of our control group. We're going to use no prioritization scheme. We're just going to say, all right, we're just going to randomly choose stuff to work on. Okay. In this first example, don't worry about these numbers. These numbers don't really mean anything. I've just got this slide to prove to you that we actually ran the numbers and did the calculations. Again, if anybody wants to understand these numbers a little bit better, I believe Pratik has published a paper on it, but if not, you can contact him. I'll give you his contact information so you can send him hate mail. That's fine. Okay, but in this first run, on average, CD3 outperforms the other stuff, by 10% and 68% respectively. So this first run of this simulation that we just went through, we actually just proved that CD3 outperforms duration by that CD3 actually works, right? It's all it's cracked up to be, assuming we have that information. Okay, that if you know duration and you know value and you know all those stuff, then yeah, CD3 is going to work. But now let's change it, because this is probably the best quote by probably one of the best philosophers of our time. Right? Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That was punched in the face, but whatever it is. So we're all these assumptions. Remember that we said value is deterministic and duration is deterministic, and projects aren't showing up. We're going to challenge these assumptions, and we're going to say, okay, whatever value we think we had up front to do our prioritization, we're going to still choose that value at random. But then when the project is delivered, we're going to go and choose another value at random to say, okay, this is really what the value was when we delivered it. And we're going to say those two pieces of information are different. So I hope that makes sense. I don't know, Alex, you tell me if this makes sense or not. Is that we're saying we're going to assume a value up front to come up with our prioritization scheme. But then once the project is delivered, we're going to randomly pick another value to say, okay, this is actually what the value was. Because I think that more correctly models the world. Same thing with duration. So if we do that, again, these are the numbers, then what you'll see is that on average, cost of delay divided by duration, CD3, it actually underperforms just prioritizing based on duration alone by 17%, but it's still better than random. So what this is telling us is if we assume that we don't know value and we don't know duration upfront, then it's actually better to prioritize just based on duration. Forget about value. Don't even waste any of your time on value. It's actually better to prioritize based on duration, because you'll get a better result. But it gets better than that. Okay. And here's something that we that I want to talk about, this notion of right sizing. So in all the simulations up until now, we've just let projects take as long as they need to take to complete. It's like, okay, I don't care if it takes 1 week or 20 weeks or 200 weeks. It's just going to take as long as it takes to complete. Well, what if we introduced this more lean approach, what we call right sizing? So if a project looks like it's going to be too big, then we break that project up into smaller projects, and we deliver those smaller projects. Those projects go back into the backlog to get reprioritized, value estimations and things like that. So we break it up into multiple independent projects, throw it back into the backlog, and run the simulation that way. So how does introducing this idea of right sizing change the numbers? So again, we have the results, but here's what you wanted to know. Believe it or not, if what you do, if you focus on right sizing, if you just focus on this idea of right sizing, because remember, we don't necessarily know duration up front. So as we're working on a project, if it looks like it's taking too long, if we're able to break that project up into multiple valuable items using right sizing, then it literally does not matter what order you pull these projects in. You can pick them at random and you will get a much better result than any other technique that you use that doesn't involve right sizing. So I hope that makes sense. If you introduce this idea of right sizing, it will always, well, I should say always, I shouldn't say always, but on average, by 182%, you have an 182% chance essentially. Well, no, that's not right either. But if you just focus on right sizing, chances are you'll be much more successful than any other prioritization scheme without right sizing. The implication of that is if you introduce right sizing, you can throw out all this value estimation. You don't even need to do it. It literally doesn't matter. This freaks people out, but it doesn't matter. So kind of another way of saying that is if you're going to invest in process improvement, if your goal is to maximize value, if your goal is to optimize or maximize value, you're much better off investing in getting your process such that it can get stuff done as quickly as possible, the smallest possible pieces of value through your process as quickly as possible. You're much better investing time and money in that and perfecting or trying to perfect that than investing any time and money in trying to do this value or duration estimates upfront. Because if you spend all your money in trying to come up with value estimates, your estimates are going to be wrong and you're actually going to lose money over time. Alex, does that make sense?
I have to ask, man.
Okay,
And
go.
I know that you gave me this answer like 3 or 4 years ago, but I want everyone to hear that I am not crazy, right? So what about effort behind right sizing? Does it matter?
Sorry, did you say effort?
Yep.
Um, just so I make sure that I answer this, when you say effort, you're just talking about define effort for me.
Yeah, I mean, you know that there are a lot of techniques out there, right? Where we try to figure out how much effort it to do something, right?
So you're talking about like developer days or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Yeah. So yeah, no, effort, believe it or not, effort does not enter into this at all. And there's
Can you
another
repeat
talk.
that again, please?
effort does not enter into this at all. What really, the only thing that matters, and Pratik likes to say this, customers don't care about how hard you're working on something. Customers care about when something is delivered. That's what they care about. So that's really what you should be focusing on is, getting that stuff delivered, independent of complexity, independent of, what we think our effort is needed. This is that whole, this whole idea of, resource utilization versus flow efficiency. Most managers want to manage toward loading people up to as much as possible, right? What do you mean you've got some free time? What do you mean you've got some downtime? If you've got some free time, pick up some new work and work on that. Turns out that's the absolute worst thing you can do. What's much better is to, like I said before, focus on working as few things at a time to get those things through the process as quickly as possible, because that's what's going to maximize value. Now, what you are going to do by doing that is there are going to be people with downtime. There's going to be people potentially sitting around twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do. And that's okay, because that's what we need to do to maximize value. I say this a lot, and I hope it translates okay. But flow, most principles of flow are unintuitive to the point of being counterintuitive. Just doesn't make sense. To most people, it doesn't make sense. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that? Alex?
Oh yeah, I remember your exact phrase was variability doesn't kill predictability or something like that, right?
That what? So what?
Variability does not kill predictability.
Oh yeah, that
So,
sounds like something I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is here in Slido we have something. It says deterministic. It could be that the COD is based on quote, how much am I losing or how much am I not making money?
So yes, and I'm glad that question was asked because I want to make sure this is clear. One thing that we proved in this simulation was that if you have that cost of delay information, and there are certain contexts where you might have cost of delay information. For example, maybe you've got a contract where if you don't deliver a certain feature by a certain date, you're going to have to pay money to the customer or whatever. Maybe it's a regulatory thing where if your product doesn't have a certain feature, it's not in compliance and the government is going to fine you. Right? Those are very specific contexts where you literally do have that cost of delay information. When you have that cost, and when you're sure about the cost of delay information, when you have that, by all means use it. Because as we proved before, when you have that information, cost of delay works. It absolutely does work. That's Don Reinertsen is right. The problem is in our world, when we don't have that cost of delay information and we think that we do, that's the whole, remember, you think you've got a winning strategy, but you've got a losing one. That's the biggest risk. It's in those situations where we think somebody just made up a cost of delay number somewhere and said, this is the cost of delay. In those contexts where if you don't have cost of delay information, good cost of delay, literally pick stuff at random and get it through the process as quickly as possible. So anyway, long story short, yes, you can use situations where, if we don't have this thing, we lose money, as part of that cost of delay calculation. For sure, absolutely, you can. Just make sure that we know that's exactly what we're doing.
Cool. So there is another question here in the slide that says, how cost of delay manages variability of the software development?
I don't know that it does. I guess I'd like to understand a little bit more. I don't know that cost of delay has anything to do with the variability. Was the word that was used variability? Is that right?
Yeah. How
I don't think
cost of delay manages variability?
I would say it does not. I would say cost of delay has almost zero impact on variability. I guess I don't know for sure, but if I had to bet Alex's life on this, I would say there's probably no correlation.
We have Patrick, I think in the call, so let's bet on him, right?
Oh, is Pratik in the call? Is he actually?
Are you there, man?
Yeah, I am.
Oh crap! Did you hear me throw you under the bus earlier?
No.
It's like if anybody disagrees with the numbers, they should call you. But yeah, no. I'm assuming we're talking about variability of the process. Is that what is meant by the question?
Probably.
Yeah. I would say there's no correlation between cost of delay. I mean, you can have something with a really, really high cost of delay that is very, very simple to do, and you can have something with a really, really low cost of delay that is super, super, super complex. So, and then you wouldn't be able to predict things like dependencies or, a global pandemic. That's COVID is a classic example of variability that's outside of our control that has nothing to do with cost of delay. So. I guess that's how I would answer that question.
Cool. There's another one. Batch sizing. It is important?
But so that's essentially what right sizing is. Right sizing is one way to control batch size. So yes, the short answer is absolutely. Because the problem with letting our projects or our products or whatever getting too big is what you're doing is, whether you know it or not, you're increasing batch size. A lot of people, it might look good on your Kanban board if you're using a Kanban board, because like, hey, we've only got this one thing on our Kanban board, but that one thing is huge and it really should be broken down into 20 things. So it looks like you're working on only one thing, but you're really working on 20 things. So absolutely, batch size or right sizing is one way to control batch size. That's again, that's where I would, if it were me, that's where I would invest my time and money, is controlling that batch size. That's probably the most definitive thing I think that we proved. I would assume Pratik would agree with me, is that if you do nothing else, if you control for batch size, that's what you should be doing.
I think for all the variables, that is the only thing that we can actually control, right?
And that's the beautiful thing. That is the beautiful, you're exactly right. Exactly.
So we have another comment here that, I mean, he's trying to figure out still the calculation. I don't know if he's stuck with the derivative, with the partial derivative from the start or not, but he's wondering how are you calculating stuff.
So what is the exact question? Should I review that cost of delay calculation?
No, he was more like, what the hell?
Yeah, I know, exactly. I have never come across a company, me personally. Now, again, you might want to talk to Don Reinertson. I think he's had different experience than I have, but I've never come across a company that calculates cost of delay the way that Don Reinertson says you're supposed to. I've just never, ever seen it in practice. I don't even know how you could do it. If you can do it, like I said, you're actually doing pretty well, but I don't know how that would work.
So there's another one. It's really related, I think, with what you have already discussed, but I will ask you anyway. So what is the correct way to do right sizing? I know that you have already set up something about that, but can you be more specific?
We should let Pratik handle all the hard questions. The right way to have right sizing. This is where the notion of, well, there's a couple of notions here. It depends on if we're talking about flow at the single item level, or flow at, I guess, flow at the team level, or flow more at the portfolio or project or product level. But there is this notion of, at the team level, there's this notion within Kanban, something known as a service level expectation. So, and if you haven't heard of a service level expectation, can I do a shameless plug, Alex? Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
If you've never heard of service level expectation, come check out what we're doing at prokanban.org. So prokanban.org is a fairly new Kanban community. It's been around since the middle of last year, where we're trying to get Kanban back to its roots. We're trying to build a safe, inclusive, diverse community of people that are really trying to get Kanban back to where it always was from the beginning. That it's not so complicated.
And I will say something that probably you're not going to say, but I will say it anyway, right? So Daniel Vacanti was one of the first person that actually run Kanban on a project, right? Not an operation. I know that you're not going to say anything about it, but I will for you, man.
Right. Yeah.
So we have here, someone that really know his stuff. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But yes, yeah, I was the first one to use, one of the first ones to use it for projects. So within that notion of Kanban, there's something called a service level expectation. Now, what a service level expectation is and how to calculate that's way beyond the scope of this presentation. Maybe I can come back and talk about some of the basics if anybody wants me to. But if you have that service level expectation on your board, that SLE becomes your right sizing. So if we say, hey, our stories that are moving through our board should take 10 days or less, 85% of the time, that's your right sizing. And what you do is you monitor these items as they're flowing through your process. And if it looks like a particular thing is going to take longer than 10 days, well, the team gets together and has this conversation about, well, what do we need to do about this thing? It looks like it's bigger than what we thought. Do we need to break it up? Do we need to swarm on it? Do we need to kick it out of the process? What do we need to do? So it's this kind of, it's continuous forecasting, continuous right sizing type of thing. At higher levels, if we're talking about epics or features or things like that, epics generally are broken down into multiple stories. Features are generally broken down into multiple stories. So what you would do is you would say, you know what, a right size feature for us is a feature that doesn't have any more than 20 stories. So we get a feature that comes in, we break it down into a whole bunch of stories. If in breaking that item down, it looks like it's going to be more than 20 stories, and we say, okay, what can we do to break this up so that we can still deliver it and it's valuable? Or once we start working on it, because as everybody knows, you start working on it, you discover things, and maybe you're adding stories to the feature. If you're adding stories and it looks like that's going to get bigger than 20, you break it up, right? Just for examples, that's right sizing, and that's how you would do it.
This is not a question from me, huh? But this one is going to be really hot for you. How do you relate cost of delay with classes of service? Risk dimensions and or triage
Yeah,
proposed by the Kanban method.
yeah, that wasn't you. I know that was you for sure, Alex. I know
It
that was
wasn't
you.
me,
You're
man.
prodding them.
I can send you a
I
screenshot.
might, I don't know. Probably should maybe hand that off to Pratik, and so because I might start yelling. I don't, Pratik, do you want to handle that one, or do you want me to?
No, it's all you.
Okay. All right. Again, so I don't want to bash a particular method. I mean, I kind of do, but I don't. But the assumptions behind how the Kanban method talks about class of service, again, are these assumptions that you can know cost of delay up front, and you can't. And so they say that you're gonna call something an expedite based on cost of delay, or call something a standard or a fixed date or whatever based on cost of delay. And worse, even worse, they will say is, as you're working on something and the profile of that item changes, you should change its class of service, which is one of the worst things you can do. Don't get me started on this. The much better approach, believe it or not, the much better approach is to treat everything the same way. Remember, like I said, optimize your overall process so that everything going through the process is getting done as quickly as possible. If I have an expedite class of service and I can get those items done in 3 days, why can't they build a process where I get everything done in 3 days? You should be able to do that. Not only should you can do that. I mean, you literally can. So then introducing classes of service, especially based on cost of delay, will make your overall process perform worse. It won't actually make it perform better. And worse than that is, not only are you performing worse, you're going to deliver much less value over time. So you're going to be less predictable, and you're going to deliver less value over time by introducing class of service. So in general, that's just the way it works. And I have a whole talk around that too, if anybody wants me to come back and talk about class of service.
The Titanic.
Yeah, exactly. It's classes of service are one of the worst things that you can do to your process, despite what you've read. I know there's a lot of people out there saying a lot of things about how great class of service is. Just so you know, as Alex said, in that very first Kanban project we did everything we could to not use class of service because we knew how much they destroyed flow. The class of service was not a part of our first Kanban system. It wasn't, despite what other people might say.
Cool, man. So we have another question. What other resources do you recommend to deep dive into the COD, if there are any? I mean, Tom Renderston is one, right? Do we have more?
Well, like I said, to understand what cost of delay really is, Don Reinderson is the man. He's the Don, right? He is the guy. I'd love to give you names to stay away from, but that'd probably be just rude. So I don't think I should do that. I'm not going to go on record of saying names of people that you should not read. The only, honestly, and this sounds silly, but the only other resource that I can give you is Pratik and I wrote a blog post. It's out there on Medium. I don't know.
Yeah, we can share the link.
I don't know if you can share that link. It's essentially this presentation that's written up in a much more formal way. Other than that, so like I said, I rely on Don Reinertsen to understand what cost of delay truly is. And then I took Don Reinertsen's model, or I shouldn't say we took Don Reinertsen's model and applied that to the variability that we see in our world to come up with the model, how we think about it.
So I just pasted that article.
Right? And it's really long. It's actually meant to be a chapter in a book. Pratik and I started writing a book. I don't know how many years ago. I don't know if I'll ever finish. But that was actually meant to be a chapter in the book, and we figured, well, let's just publish it as a blog post. So it's kind of I won't say kind of, it is a very long read. So hopefully you can make it through it.
So there's another one. Can't just say to my C-level, we are going to work on random items because we don't have X dollars info or COD. What would you advise as a good approach for them to get it?
Well, I mean, like I said, you can still, there's probably, this is what I would say. There's probably a prioritization scheme that you've got right now. So, you know, can continue to use that. I would say continue to use that and focus your energies again on making your process as efficient as possible in getting those things done. Once you have your process as efficient as possible, then we can start taking that data that's coming off of our process to start having the conversation like what I'm talking about now is like, hey, we know our stories take roughly this long. We know our epics take roughly this long. We know our features take roughly this long, whatever it is. And we can start having that conversation and saying, hey, it doesn't matter. The order of this stuff in the backlog doesn't matter. As long as we're getting those things through the process, that's what will deliver the most value in the long run. The analogy that I love to use, and this is why I recommend Annie Duke. I don't know if anybody's heard of Annie Duke and her book Thinking in Bets, and most CEOs should get this, is you're essentially gambling. All those items in your backlog, you need to think of those as bets. Think like you're playing poker, and those are all bets that you're trying to make.
Mao is showing that book, right, Mao?
Yeah. And if you think about it that way, most poker players will tell you, most professional poker players will tell you that the way that you win poker tournaments is to stay at the table as long as possible. And the way that you stay at the table as long as possible is not placing these big, huge bets on a few items. The way that you stay at the table as long as possible is you place a lot of small bets on as many items. You want to see as many hands as you can. And so that's how I would start introducing that. But you have to come with the data that your process is as efficient and effective as possible first. Before I would say, that's what I'm saying. I would do that before I would change any prioritization method. Make sure you focus on you're actually able to deliver this stuff as efficiently as possible. Because if you can't do that, then it doesn't matter.
Right. Right. So the last one, for the sake of time, and thank you. I really appreciate that you that you're answering all our questions here. Can OKRs be combined with cost of delay? Wow.
I mean, can they?
I mean, yes, they can, right? Because you are setting up an objective, and a key result might be something out of it.
Yeah, but I guess the reason I'm kind of scrunching my face up is I wouldn't want to set an OKR based on cost of delay. I would want to set an OKR more based on the outcomes that we're getting, regardless of what we thought the cost of delay was. And this is something, I'm just going to steal Pratik's thunder here. This is something that he talks about all the time. So many people want to invest in trying to understand value and effort up front, but rarely does anybody invest any time or effort in understanding, okay, this thing that we delivered, did it really deliver the value that we thought it did? So I guess to me, it would be, if I was going to have an OKR, it would be more tied to what we delivered rather than what we thought the value was that we delivered. But even then, that seems a bit dodgy to me because it's not deterministic, you know?
Right. One of the things that helped me out to understand the thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but is that it's not one single value, right? It's I mean, it's not one point in the graph that defines value, right? I mean,
Right.
Value is like this big bell curve, right? Where you can have a lot of spots there, right? So, I mean, getting to know that single piece of information and saying that point in the graph, it's the truth, it's hard, right? It's
Right.
like thinking about in terms of duration, right?
Yep.
When we say that, we are going to have this done for the 1st of March or whatever, right? That's deterministic. We are just thinking about one possibility, right?
Right. And back to your point, I think that you made right at the beginning, Alex, is, how many of you have ever worked on projects for a long time that never got delivered? How many of you have worked on projects that when they got delivered, they actually lost money? Well, if you knew upfront, before you even started working on it, if you knew that project was never going to get delivered, or you knew that project was going to lose money, you would have never worked on it. Right? I mean, you just wouldn't have. I mean, any rational person would not have worked on it. So that's why, tying OKRs to our understanding of upfront. Like I said, that I don't know, that doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yeah. So thank you, Danny, for being here. I mean, I really appreciate it. And I want to put Pratik in the spot because I know he has a great talk about do customer lies. I mean, is customer a liar, man? Is that even possible? So can you please give us that talk because I think it's really interesting. So what do you say, man? Can we have you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll be more than happy to. Absolutely.
Thank you, man. So, Daniel, is there anything else that you want to say to
Yeah,
the
the
audience?
final thing, like I said, if you haven't checked us out at prokanban.org, and literally just the URL is pro as in professional, prokanban.org.
There is a
Check us out.
Kanban guide there, right?
Well, the Kanban guides is a different site, but yeah, it's linked. But yeah, we've got a Kanban guide, we've got classes, we've got an assessment. Just come check us out. What we're doing. The last thing, just very quickly, sorry for everybody. You were supposed to remind me. I wanted to talk about Tom Brady. So we never got back to Ditka, and as you can imagine, Ditka did terribly in his season, and I think he was fired, if not the next season, the season after. But Tom Brady. And this is actually, I forget the draft when he was drafted. Was it 2006? I can't. Anyway, somebody's gonna have to go look that up. Tom Brady, who many could argue, I wouldn't, but many could argue is the greatest quarterback ever. He just won his seventh Super Bowl. This quarterback has won more Super Bowls than any other franchise in history. Him alone has won more Super Bowls than any other franchise. He's been to 10 Super Bowls, won 7 of them. I mean, easily in that argument for greatest quarterback of all time. Anybody? I don't know. Alex, can you? I don't know if you know this story. Any idea what number he was picked? If you had to guess, based on this is the best quarterback ever.
He was a 6th pick.
He was the 6th pick.
Yes.
Actually, he wasn't. He was the 199th pick.
Okay, in the 6th round then.
He was picked in the 6th round. Yeah, I think that's what you mean. Yeah, he was picked in the 6th. 198 players picked before Tom Brady, the greatest player of all time. And we're saying we're going to pick 198 players before this guy. That in and of itself should tell you we do not know value up front. So that's what I want to leave you with. Remember, actually, as always, remember the real risk is thinking you have a winning strategy when you have a losing one. So just thanks to everybody for some resources here. Thanks to everybody for coming. Thanks for the invitation, Alex, for letting me, and hopefully I get to see you in person. Thanks to Pratik for letting me steal all his information too.
Yeah, and these guys have a great show. It's called Drunk Agile, right? I mean, what are you guys drinking right now?
We should be. Oh, and when we come to Mexico, we're going to have a FIFA tournament too. So.
Oh yeah, we have the crew ready for the rematch.
Right, bring it on. Bring it on.
So just to finish this talk, I would like to let the audience know that we have some upcoming events. Right, we are still trying to give you some value, right? Some valuable information, and there you go. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you for being here, and we are going to start a show that is going to be called. Have you guys seen this show from the 90s, Celebrity Deathmatch? So we're going to do something similar, right? So it's going to be called Agility Deathmatch, and we're going to put some concepts that they're to fight and see if something wins. So we love to have you there also, Daniel. And we're going to have also this webinar, Agile for Women Talk, next 9th of March. So if you can join, it will be great. We'll have great presenters there that will talk us about these challenges of having to work remotely. So we'll love to hear their thoughts on that. And Pratik, also we're having you, man, with your great talk about customers. Hires? Really? I don't think so, man. Right?
What's up?
Are they?
Yeah.
Are they? Are they not?
They mostly are.
Everybody lies,
Everybody
especially Pratik.
That is for sure, man. So, I mean, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Patrick, for being here. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it, man. And well, thanks everyone for joining in. Great show. Thank you for being
All right.
here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Be safe. Be well. I hope to see you soon.